All right. Welcome everyone to IsoBreak. I'm Ravi Shankar, the host. This is IsoBreak 15 at Asia Pacific Writers and Translators and New York Writers Workshop joint co-production. And I'm really excited about today's lineup, the Pacific Showcase. I'm going to bring all the writers on who will be with us today. And we're going to be going for about an hour and half or so. We'll have hear from each of the writers that we have, and then at the end we'll have a conversation, kind of an open Q&A. Very happy to take any questions from all of you. And I want to just say to a couple of little announcements. There is a call for submissions for Asia Pacific writers and translators. Pratik Fire and Ice, which I believe ends today. And you can find out more about APWT at AP Writers and the New York Writers Workshop at the NewYorkWritersWorkshop.com. They're doing an amazing immersive writers workshop in Athens, Greece, and I think there's still a couple of seats remaining in Hydra in Athens in early in the summer. So, without further ado, I'm really excited about the writers that we have on deck today, and it is really a pretty distinguished group, I think, and we'll hear from each of them. And I want to kind of start off by having Craig Santos Perez, who's coming in from Hawaii. Um, he'll be our first reader, but I would also just like to hear from him to kind of because he just has edited this terrific anthology of Shimura poetry, and uh, I would love to hear from Craig about what I've loved Craig's work for a really long time, and he's got this series from unincorporated territory, which talks about the island that some of us in America know as Guam, that of course has other histories. And he is a professor in the English department at the University of Hawaii, teaches creative writing, eco poetry, and Pacific literature. He's also an affiliate faculty with the Center for Pacific Island Studies and the Indigenous Politics Program. And he is very active as the director of the Creative Writing Program and chair of the Hawaii Asia Pacific Islander Board in the last year. And that his recent monograph, which just came out and which I hope everyone will go get, is Navigating Shimura Poetry, Ingenuity, Aesthetics, and Decolonization, which just came out. But he's also a terrific poet, and it's my pleasure to have you here with us, Craig. And so I'm hoping you might say a few words and then share some of your work with us.
Well, Hafa aloha. Thank you so much, Ravi, for having us for that introduction. I want to thank the Asia Pacific Writers and Translators organization. I also want to acknowledge Eve Stafford for connecting me to this wonderful nonprofit which has done so much great work supporting writers and translators throughout the Asia Pacific region. I should say I'm former director of creative writing program and former chair of the Hawaii Asia Pacific Board here at the University of Hawaii. And thus I actually had time to finish my monograph and to edit the anthology that Ravi mentioned. I'm so excited to present with just writers that I really admire throughout the Asia Pacific region here today. And I'm really excited to get us started. So I'm going to read three poems. The first I wrote last year, and for those who don't know, 2021 was the quincentennial, or the 500-year anniversary of Ferdinand Magellan's circumnavigation of the globe. And on that journey, he actually made landfall at my homeland of Guam, which became the first island in the Pacific to become known by Europeans. So last year, Spain actually sent one of their naval ships to retrace this circumnavigation as a celebration of this great history of exploration. And so I was asked to write a poem to commemorate Magellan's wonderful feat, and I wrote this poem. is called mutiny. Call this mutiny. My refusal to praise the first circumnavigation of the globe. My refusal to herald Magellan's name bestowed upon ships, waterways, and galaxies. Call this mutiny. My retelling of the story from our perspective. My ancestors standing on the shores of Guam and sighting 3 monstrous ships piercing the horizon. Aboard outrigger canoes, they flew above the waves towards first contact. The date was March 6, 1521, according to your calendar, not ours, in the year of your Lord, not ours. Call this mutiny. My retelling of the story from our perspective. We discovered you, lost and drifting in our already named ocean. We saved you, diseased and starving with food and water, yet you mistranslated trade as theft, named us Islas de los Ladrones. You came ashore, burned a village, and killed 7 of my ancestors. First, violence. Call this mutiny. My refusal to affirm the claim that you put Guam on the map. You put us in the crosshairs of empire. I refuse to affirm the claim that our history began with your arrival. Our history spans millennia before you were born. We navigated this ocean long before your people ventured beyond continents. Call this mutiny. My refusal to believe Guam is destiny's landfall, that your presence was manifest by the divine doctrine of discovery. We were not destined to be the first colony in the Pacific, colonized by Spain, used as a port for the galleon trade between Acapulco and Manila. We were not destined to be depopulated by disease and conquest or baptized in our own holy blood by the sharp edge of the cross. We were not destined to have our gods banished, canoes burned, and land stolen. You called us thieves, but it was your people who looted the world. You called us savage, but it was European civilization that mastered savagery. Call this mutiny. My commemoration of Guam as more than a mere dot in the latitudes and longitudes of imperial history. Today, I commemorate the quincentennial of Chamorro's surviving the violent wake of your voyage. I commemorate my people, rebuilding our canoes, resurrecting our religion, revitalizing our culture, relearning our language, resisting colonization, protecting our lands, and struggling for sovereignty, still standing here. Call this mutiny. My commemoration of Chamorro resilience, which is so vast, no armada of galleons can ever circumnavigate. So needless to say, they didn't share my poem at, at the commemoration festivities, but that's okay. All right, my second poem is called Off Island Chamorros. And this poem kind of talks about my own journey migrating from my homeland of Guam to California. Off Island Chamorros. My family migrated to California when I was 15 years old. During the first day at my new high school, the homeroom teacher asked, "Where are you from?" "The Mariana Islands," I answered. He replied, "I've never heard of that place. Prove it exists." But when I stepped in front of the world map on the wall, it transformed into a mirror. The Pacific Ocean, like my body, was split in two and flayed to the margins. I found Australia, then the Philippines, then Japan. I pointed to an empty space between them and said, "I'm from this invisible archipelago." Everyone laughed. And even though I descend from oceanic navigators, I felt so lost, shipwrecked on the coast of a strange continent. Are you a citizen? He probed. Yes, my island Guam is a U.S. territory. We attend American schools, eat American food, listen to American music, watch American movies, play American sports, learn American history, dream American dreams, and die in American wars. You speak English well, he proclaimed, with almost no accent. And isn't that what it means to be a diasporic Chamorro, to feel foreign in a domestic sense? Over the last 50 years, my people have migrated to escape the violent memories of war, to seek jobs, schools, hospitals, adventure, and love. But most of all, we migrated for military service, deployed and stationed to bases around the world. According to the last census, 44,000 Chamorros live in California, 15,000 in Washington, 10,000 in Texas, 7,000 in Hawaii, and 70,000 more in every other state. We are the most geographically dispersed Pacific Islander population within the US, and off-island Chamorros now outnumber our on-island kin, with generations having been born away from our ancestral homelands, including my daughters. Some of us are able to return home for holidays, weddings, and funerals. Others won't be able to afford the expensive plane ticket back to the Western Pacific. Years and even decades might pass between trips, and each visit will feel too short. We'll lose contact with family and friends, and the island will continue to change until it becomes unfamiliar to us. And isn't that too what it means to be a diasporic Chamorro, to feel foreign in our own homeland? Even after 25 years away, there are still times I feel adrift, without itinerary or destination. When I wonder, what if my family stayed? What if I return? When the undertow of these questions begins pulling me out to sea, remember, migration flows through our blood like the aerial roots of the banyan tree. Remember, our ancestors taught us how to carry our culture in the canoes of our bodies. Remember, our people, scattered like stars, form new constellations when we gather. Remember, home is not simply a house, village, or island. Home is an archipelago of belonging. Okay, the last poem I'm going to read is very short, and I chose to share it today because it's about a subject that actually connects many parts of the Asia and Pacific region. The poem is called The Zen of Spam. And these are meditative kind of koans, little riddles. So I'm going to ask everyone out there to close your eyes and just meditate on these short Zen of Spam poems. 1. There is no path to spam. Spam is the path. What is the sound of no spam frying? Spam is the absence of striving for spam. Is America spam? Why aren't you eating spam, you ask me. I no longer see spam as outside my body, I reply. Why eat? And the last one. First there is spam, then there is no spam, then there is. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ravi. I'm looking forward to hearing all the other readers.
That was great. Thank you so much, Craig. And looking forward to having a little conversation at the end of this. Those of you that are just joining us, I'm Ravi Shankar. This is IsoBreak 15. And happy National Poetry Month. I just remembered April. We is the start of a hopefully a celebration of poetry, and this ISO break certainly contributes to that, I think. So next up, we have another Hawaii poet, and I'm gonna bring her on screen. This is Nua Rivila, who is also coming from Hawaii, and she is a performer and educator who was born in Maui, and she is the 2021 National Poetry Series winner. And Ask the Brindled is about to come out, I think, with Milkweed in the fall. Is that right?
In August.
In August. Woo!
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to that and to your work. So, no, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ravi. Mahalo for making space for us and Pacific Poetry here with ISO Break. I'm really grateful to Asia Pacific writers and translators for making this gathering possible. Aloha kako. My name is No'uri Villa. I am OEV from the island of Maui, but I currently live in the Valley of Palolo on the island of Oahu. And Craig, I love you so much, Craig. You know, we are still standing, still carrying our ancestors' stories. Mahalo for your work as always. I have one poem to read today, but before I do, I wanted to share poetry from one of my favorite archives here in Hawaii. I'm always hungry to share a sense of continuity of literature here in Hawaii that extends intergenerationally all the way back to my kupuna to today. And so the archive I'm drawing from today is from the 1970s. So in the 1970s, Hawaii's Poets in the Schools program began, and it facilitated creative writing workshops throughout the islands, both in public and private schools. The program also published many anthologies that included student work and facilitator poetics. You know, we have such a great source of literary talent here in Hawaii, truly a growing source of inspiration. So today I wanted to open space with voices of our Keikio Hawaii. I was going to share my screen, but for some reason the traffic's not allowing me. So I'm gonna drop these into the chat. But the first two poems that I want to read, and these are very short, come from Kalihiuka Elementary and Sunset Beach Elementary. And these poems are just so beautiful, inspired by family members, and the world building in these poems by these students still take my breath away. My cousin is quick. He could lift a city. His tongue catches all the flies past him, writes Joffrey Valdez, grade 6. Joby Prentice, grade 4, writes, the heads of my dad's birds are filled with light. And you keep going through these anthologies and you notice that the inside the world building of these students' poems, there are these lyric moments that really stun you. Renee Chun, grade 2, writes, the insides of the bodies pointed at me. Grade 2. And students' use of color and kinesthetic imagery are equally stunning. Nicole Nakayama, grade 4, writes, hard hugs make me blue-headed. Blue-headed, grade 4. Rhoda Aguilar, grade 3, writes, when my mom goes to store, my sisters grow black in their room. And last but not least, possibly one of my favorite lines ever written, comes from Don Ishii, grade 6. My brain exploded into poi. I mean, what? So declarative, so delicious, so particular to Hawaii. During the lockdown, as we kept teaching, I found myself going back into these archives, going back into these anthologies, and learning so much from these students. I stand in gratitude to all the poets and community members who made the Hawaii's Poets in the Schools program possible from the 1970s to the 1990s, and the people who prioritized making these anthologies a published reality so that these students could see their work in writing. And I hope these lines inspired you all too today. Today I'm going to read a sestina. Because of COVID, I have not seen my sister face to face in 2 years, which is the longest stretch of time that we have gone not seeing each other in person. This sestina is a celebration of our sisterhood, no matter how dark and fierce it gets. For sisters who pray with fire. I love the smell of gasoline. My sister loves fire. We keep memorizing her list of objects to burn. The hot devotional theater of it all. No one will call it fragrance. This service station blood filling my head with firsts. The first stick shift I knuckled white. The first pack of cigarettes bought without my passing magic. My sister too didn't bleed, but smoked. In a world raised without her inflammatory hand, never called or held, we teach ourselves devotion. What it smells like, looks like, devoting fire truck lungs. Bought that first scratch of match, and still they call us emergency. Us, a garland of risk, my gasoline going everywhere. Her theater filling with blood. When I smell fire, she comes, blood flecked and crackling, devoted to each stick snapping through her. First, we aren't bright enough. First, we burn the suburbs down. My sister's heart is a box of fuses. Call her a good burn. Call us sisters in smoke. Blood makes us radiant. Everywhere my veins good, at breathing us devout, promising to love each other first. Come what sulfur, my benzene, her bick. Come what may, burn to watch her. My umbilical cord, her umbilical cord, buried together. There is no first without daughters. We are pre-contact blood. Less discovery, less devoted to the fire and brimstone. Bless my sister for the guzzling effects of her matchscape devotion, her forever calling my blood back to what came first. Mahalo nui loa.
So good. Wow, what a great performance. Thank you so much. And those of you that are just joining us, again, I'm Ravi Shankar. This is IsoBreak 15. It's a joint co-production between the Asia Pacific Writers and Translators and the New York Writers Workshop. If you are interested in more work from the Asia Pacific region, Meridian is an anthology that APWT edited. You can get it at SPD Small Press Distribution and at the AP Writers website. And there was a little bit of mention on the socials that today we have a little bit of a surprise guest, someone who I'm really pleased is with us, who's coming in to take the place of Tim Baker, who had a bit of a family emergency and hopefully will be with us another time. But I am so pleased to have my old friend, a terrific poet, Rob Arnold, who happens to be a Chamorro poet. So it was really kind of perfect. And his work has appeared everywhere from Plowshares to Hyphen to the Gettysburg Review, the Volta. They've been nominated for Pushcart Prize and received support from the Somerville Arts Council, the Jack Straw Cultural Center, and the Artist Trust. And he lives in Seattle, where he is speaking us today, and he is the interim executive director of Hugo House, which has done some great programming dedicated to Asia Pacific poetry. So, Rob, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks so much, Ravi, and thanks for all of you for letting me pitch hit here. And it's a little intimidating to read with such amazing writers, people whose work I've admired for so long. But thank you so much. I'm going to be reading 3 poems, and they are the title of each poem is a Chamorro word, and so I will be pronouncing it in my rather rudimentary Chamorro. So apologies to Craig for mispronouncing these. So the first poem is called Fan Malaba, which means praise. 1. Praise the sun, praise the moon, the tide siphoning mud off the banks, off the delta, carrying possibility to the brackish beyond. Praise the flatness of this land. Is it indicative? Does its past, its future reveal itself in the channel-cut slump of mud and shore grass, pattern-cut glass, the sucking mud, seething morass? But who are you in the scope of land, the scrape of surf and sand? Motherless, brotherless, effectively fatherless, misguided child of misfortune, misfortunate child of ache, thunderstorm, and sunbreak, celestial spark, spark of sunset, by which you mean a glitch of spin and refraction, wavelength disguised as reaction. Praise the land, praise the sea, the warmth of a hand resting on the knee. For too long, this confirmed you were alive, a simulacra of life. Too long, the dance of flies. Too long, the fear of discovery and demise. Punctual day, punctual sea, and counterpunctual spray. Praise this boundary, this gutted night. Your arm plunged elbow deep into the murky water, all that it keeps. 2. Water leads to life, and life leads to death, the mathematics of existence. And so this water flowing around the rock slowly excavates the rock, slowly eviscerates the tidal banks, tides, and tributaries. This flow of water is named Drainage Ditch Number 1. You had earlier waded calf deep in those waters which had left a rusty, almost bloody deposit on the sand. Later, a mother watched her child splash happily in that runoff. The shape of the world is water, earth etched by water, life etched by decay. 3. Beauty in darkness, beauty in the striated dawn, in the detached wing of a peahen left in the walking path. Storm of feathers circling them like a halo. The Holy Spirit, we're told, it represents an otherworldly presence, infusion of light and gold leaf laid carefully by the Renaissance painters. Holy light, divine wisdom, the spirit colors flashing before your eyes when your brother's arm crushed your carotid, squeezed until you convulsed and passed out, speaking in tongues until the blood flowed back into your brain. Was that a kind of death, or a kind of living at the periphery, at the boundary between family and hatred? Was it a kind of love, the tightening headlock, a stain on the soul, beauty in, beauty out? What you consume becomes you. Bless this beautiful bruise spreading just under the skin. Okay, and the second poem is called Tautomana, which is the people of before, ancestral spirits that inhabited the earth along with the living. Tautomana. Remember we as water. Remember we in moss and vine, laced to rock or hung from rock, tongues of lichens salting the rock face. Let we liquefy, licking the mounted root and leaf rot, fungal breath of tree bark as fringed, almost feathered ferns uncurl, fiddle-headed and their secret hollow. Let we lay sun-spun, wrapped in spider silk, the exoskeletal, sucked-out shells of beetles, bugs unscuttled, umpteen-legged, several-sectioned corpus severed in a rain of portents. Remember we in daggered light, flame-dragged, bedraggled. Remember we as ashen snow, fission waste, wafting windward, the bleached-out bones that bear their knotted fruits. Let we dismember, jungle sprites displaced, beheaded, a turbulence of limbs and hands, of mouths enslaved, all sunk in a drunken sea at sundown, little katana moon, ever longing to taste our throats. That poem was about genocide. This poem is about my mother and sort of about ancestry. It's called Petlas, which means pearl. My mother is in the islands right now. She sent me a gift package from Rhoda, full of shells, which is really beautiful. So I can't wait to spread them all over my house. Petlas. The raw pearl my mother gave to me, that I gave to you. I carry it sometimes in my dreams, its memory swelling like a blister, forged from the blood of the Pacific, little grain, little ache on the tongue. If you held it in your mouth, it would be smooth, semen-colored, embryonic. If you swallowed, it would slide down to the belly and take root there, the way I did once, little child listing in amnion, lumped silica, smoothed to a sheen. If you were to hold the mollusk in your hand, place a knife at the base of the hinge. In this way, the shell, misshapen pearl, can be pried open, separated from the meat there. There is a taste of salty mucus, of rusted nails. Can you detect the fecal bloom of the oyster beds, the pearl of shit building in the lower tracks, blushing microbiome of the tides? Can you taste the life draining from the animal, the waters that flowed through, what was sifted and what remained, what chipped at the shell to release its tumorous iridescence? Can you siphon the past into gems, all the residues draining from sewers, dead leviathans clustered with hagfish, bodies of fishermen and sailors, their mother's grief engulfed by the sea? My own mother returned decades too late to hand me this pearl, uneven thing with its own kind of potential. Her island crusted layer by layer from the sea, magma turned igneous, string of pearls draped along the Mariana Trench. Could she look east as a child and see a fire blooming in the nacreous skies over Bikini Atoll? Did she think of a pearl? On whose sons did the fallout rain, whose daughters pearls growing deep in their bodies? I think of the daughters never born to me, who will never receive this small, insignificant inheritance, a rough pearl in a plastic envelope from a highway gift shop in Hawaii. If you were to break it open and magnify the shards, they would appear structured, highly brittle, mineral platelets stacked like long boxes in a darkened warehouse. Warehouse of forgotten lives, of dead ancestors, lost mothers and children. Little speck, little star, disappearing into the folds of your hand. What does the light do as it arcs along the silken surface? What if all homelands are grains scattered in the sea? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rob. It was great to hear that new work. And thank you all. We're roughly at the midway point. I'm Ravi Shankar. This is IsoBreak 15, Asia Pacific Writers and Translators and New York Writers Workshop co-production. I mentioned just briefly before, but the New York Writers Workshop is doing an immersive writing workshop in Athens and Hydra with such faculty as Kim Adenizio, who's going to be doing something with the Oracle of Delphi in the same space, which is can't miss. So you should check out their proceedings as well. And our next writer today is Christiana Kahakauila. And Christiana is a Hapa writer, also coming from Hawaii. And her first book, This is Paradise, was named a Barnes & Noble's Discover Great New Writers selection. And she's published short fiction in such places as Hunger Mountain, the Kartika Review, Geo Magazine, and won awards like the Broughton Fellowship in Fiction at the Breadloaf Writers Conference, residencies at Jurassic, Hedgebrook, the Harding Nelson Center, and Art Omi. And she teaches in the English department at University of Hawaii and in the low residency MFA at the Institute of American Indian Arts. And we today have a reading where we have someone from Seattle, from Hawaii, and from Manila, which is one of the wonderful things about IsoBreak is that we can all come together like this. So Christiana, so nice to have you. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Ravi. Yes, huge thanks to the New York Writers Workshop and to the Asia Pacific Writers and Translators. A big thanks to my my fellow readers today, including to these kids who I guess are now grown, right? No, but to these poets who are walking around in the grocery store and at the gas station, and their first publications came when they were in 2nd and 4th and 5th grade. And, you know, whether they're being published now or not, they're still writing. They're still seeing the world in their own way, as each of us are doing. And I think that's just a beautiful thought. So thank you, No'u, for bringing that into this space. Typically, I like to read new work to push myself. I have to when I'm with such tremendous other writers. But this is sort of a special month because my collection, This is Paradise, is coming out in French translation from this wonderful publishing house in Tahiti, Auvent des Îles, who publishes authors from the Greater Pacific and works about Oceania. So it will be, the French title is, and I have to read it off my little note I left for myself. 39 bonnes raisons de transformer des obsèques hawaïennes en beuverie. So yes, if you love to read in French, it'll be out in a few days. Go look for it. I'm going to read the English version, the first 2 sections of the story. This is Paradise, the title story of the English version of the book. And it's told in rounds. There's 3 groups of women. The first, a group of 20-something surfer girls. The second, housekeeping women who work in housekeeping in the hotels, who are mostly from Micronesia. And the third, career women, Kanako Iwi, Hawaiian career women in their 30s and 40s. I'll read the first 2 sections of the surfer girls and the women who work in housekeeping. This is Paradise. Mid-morning, the lifeguards fan across the beach and push signposts into the sand. The same picture is on all of them, a stick figure, its arms aloft, its circle head drowning in a set of triangle waves. Caution, the signs read, dangerous, undertow. We ignore it. We've gone out at Makaha and Makapu'u before. We've felt yokes pull us under. We are not afraid of the beaches and breaks here in Waikiki. We are careless, in fact, brazen. So when we see her studying the warning, chewing the right side of her lip, we laugh, just like the kind scared of the water. Howlies, yeah. The tourist girl is white. They're all white to us unless they're black. She has light brown hair, a pointed nose, eyebrows neatly plucked into a firm line. She wears a white bikini with red polka dots. Triangle cut top, ruffled bottom. We shake our heads at her. Our Ahu hair, pulled into ponytails, bounces against our necks. Our bikinis are carefully cut pieces with crossback straps and lean bottoms. We surf in these, sister. We don't have time for ruffles and ruching, but she does. Like every other tourist, her blue and white striped hotel towel labels her for what she is. So why do we look at her as we pass? Why do we notice her out of the hundreds of others? Do we already know she's marked, special in some way? At the high tide line, Cora Jones and Kyla Ka'ava pull on rash guards to protect against the trade winds, which are wailing this morning. The rest of us pretend we don't have chicken skin. We strap our leashes to our ankles, careful to piece the Velcro together, and then we jump on our boards and feel them skim across the surface of the water. Arching our backs, our hips pressed into hard fiberglass, we dig the water with our hands. We raise one foot for balance, and because we know we are silhouetted against the horizon, we hold our heads high. We point our toes. Our bodies curve upward like smiles, beckoning those on shore to follow. When we look back, the tourist girl is approaching the ocean's edge. She walks into the water, the small waves lapping at her feet, ankles, knees, chest. We see her dip her shoulders into the whitewash. We don't tell her to stay away from the retaining wall in front of Baby Queens, or that today the current is moving Eva to Diamond Head. We paddle, and in a moment, we've left her behind. Only local folks leave us money, placing it on top of the television in an envelope with the word housekeeping printed across the front. We split the cash, tucking it into our shoes where management won't look for it. We, the women of housekeeping, get left other things too, but by accident. Japanese leave behind useful items, tubes of sunscreen, beach floaties, snorkel gear, unopened boxes of cereal, half-filled bottles of American whiskey, brand new packets of travel tissues decorated with Choco Cat and Hello Kitty, which our youngest girls love, the tissues we take. Even when management checks the pockets of our uniforms, they never think to confiscate packets of tissues. We don't get in trouble for bringing those home. The rest we throw into trash bags or hide on the bottom shelf of our carts to leave at the loading dock for night security. Management doesn't check their pockets. What mainland Americans leave behind us makes us blush. Used condoms under the bed, a turquoise bra with thick cups like soup bowls, pornographic magazines. We find a single blue sandal, a hairbrush tangled with yellow hair, a vibrating toothbrush, a stuffed bear with a missing arm and glass eyes, such intimate pieces to forget. Today, we have been cleaning rooms for 5 hours since 6 in the morning, tucking the bottom sheets at least 8 times, disinfecting the sinks and bathtubs, vacuuming the dark brown carpets. We have cleaned 12 rooms and have 8 more to go. We pause in the hallway. We don't have time to rest, but we do anyway, just for a moment. The room to 254 is open, and we watch a young woman tie a white wrap around her waist. Her polka dot bathing suit is damp and turns the white fabric sheer, the red dots shining through like mosquito bites. She catches us watching her. You don't need to replace the towels, she says, smiling. Conserve water. Her teeth are coins, flat and shiny. We want to tell her to wear a thicker skirt, but it's not our place to speak to guests. A young man appears from behind the wall and walks around the foot of the bed. I already left mine on the floor. The girl rolls her eyes. Then pick it up, she scolds. She turns to give us an exasperated smile, and we are reminded of our eldest daughters, impatient with nonsense, bossing their brothers, keeping the house. This girl, like our girls, is the type a mother can depend on to do things. Drive grandmother to a doctor's appointment, cook breakfast for Papa, dress and feed the babies before school. We smile back at her. We feel as if we can trust her. The young man finally emerges from the bedroom, shoelaces untied, hat pulled low over his eyes, and she smacks him lightly on the arm. You take longer than a girl, she says. She laughs, a light tinkling giggle. He laughs. They look at us, so we laugh. At the end of the hall, she turns and waves at us. We nod, small smiles tightening our lips, and then we enter the room to make the beds. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christiana. It's great. And we have one final reader for this IsoBreak 15. And afterwards, I hope you'll stick around. We'll have a little bit of a discussion. We'll hear from all of the poets and writers that we have here with us. And our final reader today is coming to us all the way from Manila. Daryl Delgado is a Filipino writer, the author of the novel Remains, which received a translation grant from the National Book Development Board, and the collection After the Body Displaces Water, which won the Manila Critics Circle Philippine National Book Award for Best Book of Short Fiction. She's received numerous writing residencies and published her work in a number of different journals and anthologies, and taught at the University of the Philippines, Ateneo de Manila University, and Miriam College, and currently works for an international NGO where she heads the research and stakeholder engagement programs for Southeast Asia and writes about migration and labor issues. So really happy to have you here with us, Daryl. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ravi. Thank you, APWT, for including me in this lineup of such notable writers and cultural workers. I was going to start by sharing a piece of music, but I did not want to risk copyright infringement. So if you would indulge me, I'll sing a very short piece of folk music just to sort of introduce myself and my culture and my language. So I apologize in advance for subjecting you to this. Kung harapit ang adlaw matunod, nganay mo harayo ako. Nagtikangan kakulbahan dughan, ngan kami nga wasay gudako. Pagtikanghan panuruhan tunog, mga dahon bukat paghumog. Ininluha, daw burabod, waray hunong hinpag tubod. Thank you. That piece I just sang is an excerpt of Dinumdum Ko Ikaw by Iluminado Lucente. It is a Waray translation of a poem by national hero Jose Rizal, originally written in the Spanish. I thought I'd try to introduce myself in my first language, Waray, because although I write in English, I think my writing is founded on the music of my mother tongue. Waray is one of the languages spoken in the Eastern Visayas region of the Philippines, where I'm from. And my home faces the Pacific Ocean and is known for mainly three things: the landing of Ferdinand Magellan and the discovery of the Philippine Islands in 1521, the landing of General MacArthur and the liberation of the Philippines in 1944, and the landfall of Super Typhoon Haiyan in 2013, strongest reported typhoon in written history. It is also the hometown of the wife of the country's most brutal dictator, but let's not go into that grim reality which is still unfolding at the moment. Despite being the site of terrible natural and man made disasters, it is a lovely place. It is home to multiple languages, my first language, being one of them. The story I will read an excerpt from is titled Out There. It came out in this journal, Your Impossible Voice. It explores notions of language and connections in the context of isolation, the potential for strange, wayward sounds to trigger reckoning. Here in this story, the narrator is a woman who is working on a project that involves supervising a colleague who is across the globe, literally, and she has to wake up at her midnight their morning so she can remotely observe the conduct of an interview. The distance and time difference that technology tries to bridge also allows for thoughts in buried memory to swim in unsanctioned. Out there, she sits up in bed, reaches blindly for the headset, and without turning on the video function, puts herself on mute and listens. The slow back and forth, the hesitation, the clipped answers in the beginning, the soothing voice of the man, and the soothed response of the woman. Her eyes close, her mind drifts. She spent 3 years learning the language, which to her has always sounded like flames in a bonfire, by the beach, reaching into and repelling each other, or tiny embers dancing in the air to some tune carried by gentle breeze. Cliches picked up from listening to bossa nova light radio, and her very limited exposure to what she does know is a complex, rich culture. She should have been there herself, talking to people in the flesh. Instead, she has to sit here, take notes, listen. The tones shift. The woman is saying, all this is just a fact of life for people like us. All the people like us all over the world right now. But we are alive. We will survive. The woman sounds defiant. The man does not press. From her bedroom, she listens. She thinks of the word appease, and a memory long suppressed suddenly surfaces unbidden. A prolonged lingering attraction acted upon on a whim one random weekend while on a break from fieldwork, a week of documenting gruesome murders of local peoples, and then finally a night at that beach in Camiguin Island. That old forgotten life, the danger, the pleasure, the sense of moral righteousness. The memory hits her like a forceful wave, so swift, so there all around her all of a sudden. Gestures, words, details surface like a relief as the background is chiseled away to reveal the unmistakable scene. And she thought, my God, what were we thinking? So clear to her now. Others must surely have known, have seen it for what it was. She feels her face heat up in shame. She frantically readjusts her headset, breathes deeply, and tries again to listen. The woman is describing her home now. There are 7 other people living in it, and she is the only one in her family who has managed to keep her job, she says, in a fruit company. Oranges, mainly. As the woman speaks, she sees it. From her bedroom, she sees the sun glaring unceasingly, the neat rows of orange trees, the organized orchards, acres and acres of it. She smells the blossoms, the pulps. She almost forgets where she is. In her bedroom, in an old apartment she has rented for a year now, behind a government hospital and a district police station in Quezon City, 13 hours away from where she should have been. Tonight, the windows are shut tight to block out the police and ambulance sirens. A week ago, she heard in the news an elderly man was found dead inside an apartment just a block away from the station. He was stabbed multiple times in the middle of the night, but no one heard any commotion, any sound. Not the neighbors in the same building, not the police on duty in the station, not her, certainly, even with the late hours she keeps. She stops herself from imagining how it could have possibly happened. She pulls herself back to the conversation flowing smoothly in her ears instead. Right now, save for the conversation in her headset, it is as quiet and dark inside the room as it is outside, but something shiny has just soundlessly crossed the roof gutters. She sees the sliver of the night sky between the edge of her roof and that of her neighbors. As long as she stays at this uncomfortable angle, the light of the passing moon cuts through the curtain of blackness. Next to her, her partner starts to snore, and she listens too to the regularity, the recently acquired familiarity of this nocturnal noise. She closes her eyes, a cloud shifts, and she feels the light. She is now inside it. She grips her sleeping partner's arm. In gratitude, in remorse, her partner stops snoring as though to listen to what she has to say. And then he resumes. First, a soft whistle riding on the breath, and soon, full throated snoring in earnest. She sighs, caresses his chest as she listens. The conversation between the man and the woman in her headset goes smoothly. She can leave the call now, try to sleep, but everything in and about her is on high alert. She could go for a walk, but the curfew is still on. Maybe she should open the windows, listen, really listen to everything that goes on during these late hours. The moon is still out. No one needing the cover at night could possibly get away. Maybe she will catch someone in action if she just looks and listens very closely. Maybe she should wake her partner up, talk to him, finally confess, admit, commit. The conversation in her headset continues. The combined voices of the man and woman tread flirtatiously over the babel of grief, uncertainty, resignation of many homes in distant lockdown cities. The lush tones, the swirl of tongues over consonants, the melodic call and response, the one on one of two no longer strangers, soar past the arcs of sunsets and moonrises that are probably passing a million bedroom windows at this very moment, and their light reaching deep, deep, deep into her. The memory of the indiscretion, the entirety of an old buried life and old beliefs attached to it, floats back to the surface. She leaves it there, stares at it as she listens. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daryl. And thank you for singing for us. That was so lovely. And I'm going to bring everyone else back on screen. Unfortunately, Rob had to leave because, as director of the Hugo House, he's putting on another reading today. But he thanks everyone. It was a pleasure to have him and have his work. And wow, what a reading! Thank you all. What a gift to hear all of that tonight. And it just had me thinking, actually. I remembered an old friend of mine, Ed Whitehead, who was born in Guam, actually. And I remember him being teased at in my elementary school for calling cucumber kamba, which I think might be a Chamorro word. And for some reason, that distinct memory just came to me hearing all of you read. And I thought maybe we could begin there because some people here might not really kind of know the history of Chamorro and Guam, territories like Guam and Puerto Rico that are kind of part of the U.S., but not this territory. Does someone want to kind of speak a little bit to that and the sense of identity that coming from a place like that confers onto its inhabitants?
Sure. Thank you, Ravi. Well, I just want to, since I read first, I had the pleasure of just sitting back and listening to everyone and just so amazed by all of your brilliant writing and so happy that we had a diversity of work and genres as well. So thank you for curating this event. As I mentioned in my first poem, Guam was first quote unquote discovered by Magellan and like the Philippines became a colony of Spain until the Spanish-American War of 1898, at which point Guam became a U.S. territory and is still our political status to this day. And so, cultural identity on Guam is very complex because of these multiple colonialisms. And, as you can see in all of our work too, there are many layerings of languages and culture and, as well as the intersections with tourism and militarism as well. And what I really love about literature from the Asia Pacific region is that, you know, the writers and translators really do address these important themes of identity, what it means to, you know, be from these island and archipelagic spaces with these deep histories, but also with these ancient cultures as well. And so, you know, I think that was visible in all of our work, and thinking about how all of us also, you know, write back against certain stereotypes of the Pacific or of Asia, and really try to show the deeper humanity of people who come from where we come from.
Anyone else want to add to that? There is in the comments, Didel had put in Lapu Lapu, a Datu in the Philippines, killed Magellan in 1521. Sadly, we Filipinos were under Spanish colonization for 400 years. We would never commemorate him either. Daryl, do you want to speak to that from a Filipino perspective?
Oh, I have a lot to say about that, but I'll just say that yes, that observation is correct. And Lapu Lapu was killed on the shores of Cebu, an island very close to my home island. And today, Lapu Lapu is also the name of a very expensive fish, which is very tasty. But that's, as you know, as much as we would be allowed to commemorate the name of an important national hero.
Mm. And I also was really, I mean, the diversity of the work we heard today was really astounding. And Nui, you just read one poem, which was a sestina. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that. How did you make your way into the form? I was really struck by how organic it was, and it didn't feel coerced. And so, was that something that emerged while you were writing it, or did you set out to write a sestina, which is one of the most difficult poetic forms because it has so much repetition inherent in it?
Thank you so much, Ravi. Before I talk story about the Sistina, I want to mahalo Daryl. Daryl, my paternal grandfather, who I've never met, died before I was born, is from Cebu. So I'm part Visayan. So just to hear your voice is just so beautiful, and thank you for singing to us.
Thank you, Noe.
Yeah, it really, yeah. Ooh, but I have Craig to thank for this. Craig has been such a mentor and inspiration to me ever since I started grad school. And Brandy Nalani McDougall is another OEV poet whose first book of poetry is just such a masterclass in how indigenous poets take these so-called closed forms and they're able to step inside it and make it their own house, or what, F the house, we're gonna make it this open air thing. I can see the ocean, family gonna come inside. And I remember in grad school I fell in love with the sestina and the sonnet, just because, like most indigenous folk, I love repetition, but also the way you can shapeshift arguments through imagery in these forms because of their constraints. It's such a wonderful way to I think constraints can lubricate strange turns and to be wayward that way. And I remember in grad school, I was learning all these forms, but I wanted something that could move the way the women who raised me move, so like that volta in a sonnet. And I think I've talked to Craig about this. The volta is that turn, right, in a sonnet. But I wanted something that could snap the way my sister's wrist snaps when she puts her hair up in a tita bun and is ready to defend her family. Like, I know a sonnet, when I write it, can move that way. So people like Craig, people like Brandy Nalani McDougall, their poetry is really important to me to be able to know that I can, So my mahalo to Craig.
Oh, that's beautifully spoken. And I'm just wondering, thinking about it, because I've been transmigrating these forms from the Rig Veda and these ancient Indian epics. The Pankti, there's so much rich poetry. And of course, we learn about the sonnet and the villanelle and the sestina, but so much of the world is ignored. Certainly was for me when I was in graduate school. Are there kind of indigenous Asia Pacific forms or that exist, either folk poetry or other kinds of. I don't know if anyone has I was just curious, kind of hearing about that. I'm wondering. I'm sure there are some, but I don't know if any have kind of made their way into an English equivalency at all.
Yeah, I'll just share. From the Marianas and Guam, we have a form called the Samarita, and it's one of our only surviving oratures, and it's a call and response form based on kind of rhyme quatrains that are thrown back and forth. So one poet will say, recite one quatrain, the other one will respond, but they have to rhyme their first two lines with the first poet's last two lines. So it's this really complicated form that goes back and forth, and it was used during, sometimes like lyrical competitions at like parties, but then also it's been used to, retell like creation stories and other legends and myths. And so I really love that form, and I try to, transform it onto the page in a way, and having those kind of voices go back and forth. And I thought that thinking about the communal nature of a lot of oral poetry, I find really exciting to try to translate onto the page and into a textual form.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I just think that we just need to kind of explode those inherited forms that exist and bring in so many other kinds of energies. I wanted, Christiana, I noticed in your bio introducing you that you kind of refer to yourself as a Hapa writer of Kanaka Maoli, which I'm probably mispronouncing. But can you tell us what that means and what it means kind of to be a native Hawaiian?
Sure. Yeah. So my father was raised on Maui, and he's a Kahakawila, obviously. And then my grandmother, his mother, was an Iole from Big Island. And then my mom's side, my maternal grandfather, that side came over from Germany, and my maternal grandmother, that side of the family came over from Norway. So they settled. They were some of the first settlers actually on Mandan land in North Dakota. And so by saying that I'm Hapa, for me, I'm recognizing that I have settler histories and I have indigenous histories. And I'm just creating a space for those stories. And I think also for a certain, again, acknowledgement of what it might mean that my maternal side settled on Mandan land. So yeah, I think that's why I want to say that I'm Hapa. Is kind of a setting up of space. I also think my stories are often doing that work of moving between spaces. I grew up in Southern California. I'm very happy I live now in Hawaii. And I spent a lot of time as a child moving between Maui and California. So I'm also always thinking about what does it mean to leave the islands like my dad did? What does it mean to return as I've been able to do?
Yeah, beautifully said. I felt like so much of the work we heard today was in between spaces in some way and had this kind of migratory feeling. I'm wondering, Craig, you just put together this anthology of Shmora poetry, but before that, was really taken by the project you had, which was there 4 or 5 different books where you were working through kind of a similar kind of concept. Would you mind telling us a little bit about that? And is that project culminated or is it an ongoing? It seems like it could have more iterations.
Yes, thank you for asking. So, when I was writing my first manuscript during my MFA, I, wanted to write a poem about my homeland and my culture. And, as I was getting close to the deadline for my program, that 2-year stopping point, I was like, I have so much more to say. And there's so much more history and aspects of my identity that I want to write about. And that was when the idea came to me where I was like, this doesn't have to be the only book I write about this topic, that instead maybe I can imagine this being a book-length excerpt of a longer series. And that gave me space to, and also permission to just stop where I was, finish that manuscript, and then continue on with the next book. And some of the poems even continue in subsequent editions. And so now, 15 years later, I have 4 of these books. They're all called Unincorporated Territory. They have a from to signify that they are excerpts, and then they have different Chamorro names to them. And so, I see them as they've emerged. I started to see them in kind of Pacific terms. So I imagine each book as an island, and then the series as a kind of unfolding archipelago of texts. And the 5th one I just finished. It'll be published next year. So like I've been working on it for almost 20 years. So I'm about 500 or so pages into it, and it'll just keep going. Hopefully, as long as I'm alive, and just keep writing the stories to honor my culture and where I come from.
Oh, it's your Leaves of Grass. Beautiful. Can't wait.
Thank you.
And also I had a kind of a very different question for Nui, who you're an astonishing performer. And I'm wondering if you can speak to, because we have a lot of students and other people who watch this. And so can you tell us about, do you have a background in theater, or there's a way in which you really are able to make your poems come alive in this really vital way? And I'm wondering, is that part of your creative practice? Do you kind of think of your poems as meant to be spoken and performed in some way?
Oh yeah. I mean, I grew up in a family, you have to earn storytelling space. You know what I'm saying? It's not just given to you. So even in ordinary conversation, if you aren't earning it, baby, step aside. You know what I mean? So I grew up with a father who just could command a space. And I remember watching him. This is my father, a fisherman, an artist, hardworking man, but he could tell a story, and people outside would come into the garage, be like, "Oh, what?" And watching him earn that kind of listening, because as poets, as creative writers, we have to earn your faith, we have to earn your time. And as a poet, who I think performance is just another way that I can earn your trust, I can earn your attention. And I think it's important to remember poetry began in the body, it should return to the body, it should be in the body. Every single poem should be spoken out loud. And I think you can't forget the body, no matter what kind of writer you are. So I like to bring my body to let whoever is listening or watching, I'm present here, and I got you. I'm in this with my body. So yeah, mahalo to my family for that.
Yeah, I mean, even on Zoom, you can feel the energy, and I'm sure in a live performance, you really would feed off of that. There's a question here for Daryl from Deedle. Do you mind sharing about Lunup and how you gathered work regarding Typhoon Haiyan, and where is the book available? And in fact, you maybe can also talk about your collection of contemporary Filipino fiction in 7 languages that just came out. I just put it into the chat for everyone.
Thank you, Diddle, for that question. And I saw your comment. You said that you and your husband Tim were in Leyte before that super typhoon struck basically obliterated the island. Lunup is a collection of poems, verses, and oral narratives, images that came out of our field work after Haiyan. So it's but it's it's a big, beautiful book, and it's meant to commemorate not so much the deaths and the losses, but also the bravery and the courage of the people. It was published by the Leyte Summer Heritage Center. So unfortunately, the distribution hasn't been done very well. But if you send me your contacts, I can give you some links, and I'll try to procure you a copy. But it's some book, and it was very difficult to put together because you had to listen to the voices and you had to go through the the whole experience, but we all thought that this is nothing compared to what people actually suffered, what people are talking about. So yeah, I hope that that book makes its way to more readers. And the other book, it's called Ulirat. Ulirat is a Tagalog word for consciousness, and this is a book that um, was published by the Gaudy Boy, our favorite publishers in New York and Singapore. So it's a book I co-edited with four other people, and we had to be like a big group of editors because we put together stories from different languages. I mean, obviously seven is just a very small number compared to the many active languages that people are writing in the Philippines. But yeah, I mean, it's really, it was an interesting process putting that book together. I was responsible for the stories in Waray, in some stories in Cebuano and Hiligaynon, and that's just something that like people sort of have the facility for languages, especially if you live in the sort of the middle islands where the languages are more related to each other, but are also very different. So uh, Filipinos in the Luzon part, like the main island part, tend to know fewer languages, and and we're lucky, the people from the middle to the southern islands, to be able to speak like more languages and read in more languages. So yeah, Dito, let me know and I'll find a way to get a copy to you.
Yes, and we love G Leong and Goudy Boy, so that's where you can get the copy of that. And
Yay.
I'm wondering, actually, Christiana, if you could speak. You mentioned that "This Is Paradise" is being translated into French. Congratulations, that's great. Can you talk about that? And did you have any input into the translation? Do you speak any French? What was that process like for you?
Yes, it was really exciting for me. I had met a translator, Mireille Vignol. She had just reached out. She had read one of my stories. She loved it. And so I think and then she had talked to Auvent des Îles. So it felt like kind of a magical experience, to be perfectly honest. And I was able to work with her. I studied French in high school and college. It was sort of my this language that I just loved, and it was also a way into kind of first studying colonialism. I studied the history and relationship of Algeria and Algerian literature, and the relationship with France, and that was before I really understood the colonial history in Hawaii or the Pacific. So it was actually through the French language in a lot of ways that I gained a more critical eye for where I had come from and what my histories were. So yes, it feels kind of extra special in that way for me to have this collection be in French, and then again to be out of a publisher based in Tahiti.
Great, congratulations. That's wonderful.
Thanks.
And I'm just looking at the clock, and I'm cognizant of time. We've kind of flown by. It's been a wonderful hour, and this will be, of course, archived on YouTube, so people can rewatch this. And there's a tradition in IsoBreak to kind of end each of our readings by kind of cracking open the metaphorical fortune cookie, and for everyone to kind of leave us with something that you're kind of thinking about, or that you're reading or deliberating on, or that you're acting on in some way. So we'll just kind of go around. So maybe I'll just pass it to Daryl, and then you can kind of popcorn it on to someone else, and we'll wind up this wonderful reading. Thank you all again for spending time with us. Again, this is IsoBreak, Asia Pacific Writers and Translators, New York Writers Workshop co-production. So Daryl, go ahead.
Thank you, Ravi, and thank you again, APWT. Thank you, Christiana, Noel, Craig, and Rob, who was with us earlier. And thank you to all of the listeners and the viewers. It has been such an honor to participate in this forum, in this reading. I have just been, I'm always thinking about multiple languages and multiple tongues, and how, our languages animate each other, and listening through, your readings, was for me very inspiring, and I guess also sort of a validation that I am on the right track, and I want to learn more about how other people write, how other people experience the world, and how they translate that into writing. So this has been such a wonderful morning, Saturday morning for me, and a Friday night for all of you. And then thank you. It's been wonderful meeting you. And I hope this will not be the last time.
Great. Thank you, Daryl. Someone else want to pick up from her?
I could jump in and just say, I teach courses in environmental literature and food writing, and I was really struck throughout everyone's readings today how those themes of food and the environment and our connections to them really, highlights such important aspects of Pacific and Asian cultures. And so just wanted to leave that little thought out there, and I'll popcorn it over to No'u.
Ola ikawai. Long live the waters. Wherever you are today, make sure that you turn to the water and you are practicing gratitude for the waters you come from, the waters you consume, because water is life. And here in Hawaii, we are struggling to protect our waters. So, ola ikawai, mahalo nui loa. Tiana?
Thank you, No'u. And thank you, Craig and Daryl and Ravi. I just keep going back to these kids' voices that No'u shared with us. I keep going back to Daryl singing her mom's voices. When I read Craig's poetry, I hear the voice of the ocean, of these waters. So maybe for me right now, I'm thinking of the many voices that inspire us to write and how we can hear better, hear more, and all those storytellers in our families and in our lineages.
Great. Thank you all so much. I will just say quickly, I was just reading about Brittany Griner, the WNBA player who's incarcerated in Russia, and then thinking about the fact that here in the US, we incarcerate about 150% more people than they do in Russia. And so, I've been doing a lot of activism and work around the broken criminal justice system. And it's something that I am kind of thinking about and keeping in my mind and heart. So, all right, with that, I want to thank everyone again. This has been a wonderful ISO break. Thank you all. Blessings. Stay safe. Keep working. We can't wait to read your next works. And for everyone, until next time, I'm Ravi Shankar. See you all on the flip side. Take care, everyone. Thank you. That was so great.